I never thought the word dad would one day sound like a stranger's name. For most of my life, it was the word that carried warmth, love, and pride. But as I sit here telling you this story, it feels like a scar, a reminder of betrayal I never expected. I worked my entire life for my son. I built him a home, gave him an education, and even helped him start his own business when he was just beginning. Every decision I made, every sacrifice, was for him. I thought when I grew old, he would be my strength, my support, the one who would take care of me the way I once took care of him. But I was wrong. My own son threw me out of the house I built with my hands. The very home where I carried him on my shoulders as a boy, where his mother cooked his favorite meals, where every corner had a memory. He didn't just push me out physically, he stripped me of dignity. Or at least, he thought he did. What he never expected was the lesson I had in store for him. You see, betrayal from strangers is painful. But betrayal from blood? That cuts deeper than any knife. And when your child, the one you raised, the one you gave everything to, turns against you, it shakes your soul in ways you can't imagine. Still, this is not just a story of heartbreak. This is a story of a father who stood back up, who refused to let betrayal define him. It's a story of dignity, patience, and justice. And before I share how it all unfolded, let me take you back to when things still seemed peaceful, back to when I believed family was forever. After my wife passed away, my world felt smaller. The house that was once filled with her laughter became unbearably quiet. My son, seeing my loneliness, insisted that I move in with him and his family. At first, I thought it was a blessing. I would no longer eat dinners alone. I could spend time with my grandchildren, watch them grow, and maybe in some small way, help my son the way he once helped me as a child. The early days were wonderful. My grandchildren would run into my room in the morning, jumping on my bed and begging me to tell them stories. I played with them in the garden, helped with their homework, and even paid some of the bills without saying a word, because that's what family does. My son seemed grateful in the beginning. "Thanks, Dad," he would say with a smile whenever I helped around the house. His wife, too, at first, treated me with warmth. She'd ask for my advice, cook me tea, and sometimes sit with me just to talk. But slowly, things began to change. The smiles became fewer. My son stopped saying thank you. My daughter-in-law started sighing whenever I entered the kitchen, as if my presence was a burden. Then came the excuses. "Oh, Dad, maybe it's better if you skip dinner tonight. We're having some friends over." Or, "Dad, you don't need to do that. We've got it under control." Soon, I realized I wasn't being invited to family dinners at all, even though I lived under the same roof. I would sit alone in my room while laughter and clinking dishes filled the dining hall downstairs. I told myself, they are young, they're busy, maybe I'm just being sensitive. I tried to stay quiet, to ignore the signs. But deep inside, I felt the distance growing. I had given them everything, and yet I was becoming invisible in my own family. It was a cold evening when the truth finally revealed itself. I was sitting in the living room, watching my grandchildren play, when my son called me into the kitchen. His face was stiff, his eyes colder than I'd ever seen. He didn't look like my boy anymore. He looked like a stranger. "Dad," he said, without hesitation, "you're old. You're slowing us down." I blinked. Slowing them down? I wasn't sure what he meant. He continued, "This house, it belongs to me now. You've had your time here. It's time you move into a nursing home. Tomorrow, pack your things." The words sliced through me like a blade. I laughed nervously at first, thinking it was a cruel joke. "What are you talking about, son? This is my house. I built it. Every brick, every wall, every memory." But he cut me off. "No, Dad. My house. You signed it over to me years ago. Legally, you have no right to stay here." I felt the air leave my lungs. My heart pounded in my chest. Signed it over? When? Then I remembered. Years ago, when I was still working, he had asked me to sign some papers. He said they were for the business, documents to help him with a loan. I trusted him. Without reading carefully, I signed. Because he was my son. Because I believed in him. And now, that trust had become my downfall. The next morning, I stood outside with 2 suitcases, a lifetime of sacrifices reduced to luggage on the street. The house I built with my hands, the home that carried my wife's laughter and my son's childhood, gone. And worse, It was taken not by a stranger, but by the very person I had built it for. I moved into a small apartment on the edge of town. Lonely, silent. The walls felt empty, and so did I. At night, I stared at the ceiling, wondering if this was how my story would end. Betrayed, discarded, forgotten. Friends visited sometimes. They shook their heads and muttered, "Kids today don't respect their parents." Their sympathy comforted me for a moment, but it didn't put food on the table or ease the ache in my chest. I started visiting my grandchildren in secret. I couldn't stay away. I would wait until my son was at work and quietly stop by the schoolyard. When the children saw me, their faces lit up. They ran to me, hugged me tight, and whispered, "Grandpa, why don't you live with us anymore?" Those words broke me more than anything else. How could I explain that their father, my son, had pushed me out? How could I make them understand betrayal at such a young age? I would smile, pat their heads, and say, "Grandpa just needs some space right now." But inside, I was shattering. Each night, I sat in my tiny apartment replaying the moment he cast me out. My heart ached with anger, but also confusion. Was I a bad father? Did I fail him somehow? But one thought kept me alive. This is not the end. Not yet. One morning, as I sat with a cup of bitter coffee in my lonely apartment, I decided to call my lawyer. He was an old friend, someone I trusted. I told him everything. How my son had forced me out, how he claimed the house was his, how I felt trapped with no way back. He listened quietly, then asked me to bring the old documents. I still kept them in a box, tucked away under my bed. Papers from the house, the business, even old contracts. He went through them carefully, page by page, until finally, he looked up and smiled. "He thinks he owns everything," my lawyer said. "He's wrong. The business loan, it's still under your name. That means your signature controls the company. And this house transfer." He tapped the page. "It wasn't done properly. You still hold leverage, more than he realizes." A strange mix of relief and anger washed over me. I wasn't powerless after all. My son had been arrogant, but careless. "Don't act yet," my lawyer warned. "Wait for the right time. Prepare. Then, when he least expects it, you show him the truth." So I waited. I didn't confront my son right away. Instead, I let him believe he had won. I let him live in his pride, boast about his house, his success, his business. All the while, I gathered strength. Every night, I repeated the same promise to myself. When the right moment comes, he will learn what it means to betray his father. That moment arrived weeks later. My grandson's birthday. My son organized a grand party at the house that was once mine. There were balloons, music, neighbors, friends, even his business partners. The place was alive, filled with laughter. But I wasn't invited. Of course not. I found out through my grandchildren, who begged me to come anyway. So I went. When I entered, the room fell quiet for a moment. Some people looked surprised to see me, others uncomfortable. My son, however, smirked. He stood at the center, glass of wine in hand, and began boasting loudly. "This is my house, my success. Everything you see here is mine." And my father? Well, he chuckled. He's too old to understand how the world works. He had his time. Now it's my turn. Laughter erupted. Some people clapped. Others looked away awkwardly. I felt anger boiling inside me, but I stayed calm. Slowly, I walked to the front of the room. In my hands was a folder, the same one my lawyer had prepared. When I spoke, my voice was steady. "You think this is your house, your business, your life? Let me tell you the truth." I opened the folder and pulled out the documents. Gasps filled the room. The deed of the house, incomplete. Half still belonged to me. The business loan, under my name. Without me, my son had no legal authority to run it. My son's face turned pale. His arrogance melted into fear. "You thought you buried me," I said, "but you forgot who gave you everything." The room was silent. For the first time in years, I saw my son speechless. The silence in the room was suffocating. My son's wife looked at him with disgust, her face turning red as whispers filled the crowd. The neighbors exchanged glances. His business partners, the very people he wanted to impress, now stared at him with doubt. And then my grandchildren ran up to me. They wrapped their little arms around my legs and hugged me tightly. "Grandpa," they said, "don't leave again." My son tried to speak. "Dad, I can explain." His voice cracked, his arrogance shattered. But I raised my hand. You can betray me as a son, but you cannot erase who I am as a father. You may own papers, you may play with signatures, but respect? That cannot be stolen. And today, in front of everyone, you've proven that you've lost it. The room remained frozen. I turned to my grandchildren and knelt down. Gently, I placed the house keys in their small hands. This house, I said, will one day belong to you. Not because of tricks, not because of lies, but because of love. Take care of it better than your father did. Gasps echoed again. My son looked horrified, realizing not only had he been exposed, but he had been humiliated in front of everyone he tried to impress. I didn't shout. I didn't fight. My words were calm, but they cut deeper than any anger could. Because in that moment, everyone saw the truth. A father's dignity standing tall, and a son's pride crumbling to dust. That night marked the beginning of my son's downfall. His business partners began pulling out of deals, questioning his stability and integrity. Without my legal signature, contracts couldn't be honored. One by one, clients withdrew. The empire he bragged about was nothing more than a house of cards. At home, things were no better. His wife, ashamed of the scene she had witnessed, started keeping her distance. The whispers in the neighborhood grew louder. People who once admired him now avoided him. And me? I returned to my small apartment, but I walked differently. No longer burdened with shame, I carried myself with quiet pride. I had faced my betrayer and stood tall. My grandchildren visited me more often. They brought drawings, stories, and hugs that warmed my heart. With them, I felt alive again. As for my son, I left him with his choices. I didn't seek revenge beyond the truth. I didn't take pleasure in his collapse. But I also didn't rescue him. Because sometimes, the greatest lesson isn't punishment. It's allowing someone to face the weight of their own actions. And for my son, that weight grew heavier each day. In the weeks that followed, I spent many evenings alone, sitting by the window of my small apartment. The city outside buzzed with life, but inside, my thoughts echoed louder. I asked myself over and over, what did I go wrong? I raised my son with love. I taught him the value of honesty, the importance of family, the weight of responsibility. And yet, somewhere along the line, those lessons slipped through his fingers. Was it my fault for trusting him too much? For not questioning the papers he gave me to sign? Or was it simply that people change, and not always for the better? Some nights, regret kept me awake. I replayed memories of when he was just a boy, running through the fields, laughing as his mother chased him with a plate of food. I remember the nights I stayed late at work just to pay for his education, the mornings I carried him on my shoulders when he was too tired to walk. And then I would think of the man he had become, cold, calculating, blind with greed. But in the quiet moments, I found peace in one truth. I had done my duty as a father. I had given him every opportunity, every sacrifice, every ounce of love I had to give. His choices were his own. It hurt, yes, but also freed me. Because sometimes, love means letting go. Life has a strange way of teaching us. We often expect betrayal to come from strangers, enemies, or rivals. But when it comes from within your own blood, it forces you to confront something deeper, the fragility of trust. My son thought he won when he pushed me out of the house. He thought power came from ownership, from signatures, from papers stamped by a lawyer. But what he didn't realize is that true power comes from respect, from honor, from love that cannot be bought or stolen. He lost everything. His business collapsed, his marriage fractured, and his reputation was destroyed. But none of that was my doing. It was all his. As for me, I learned that dignity is the greatest inheritance a father can keep. Not money, not property, not titles. Dignity. And that's what I chose to hold on to. I'm not a perfect man, and I never claimed to be a perfect father. But I know this, I tried. And in the end, that's what matters. So if you're listening to my story, take this lesson with you. Never let anyone, not even family, strip you of your honor. Because once respect is gone, nothing else can replace it. After the birthday incident, my son's downfall came faster than I imagined. At first, he tried to act as if nothing had happened. He kept boasting in front of neighbors, pretending his empire was still strong. But whispers spread quickly. People who once respected him began to doubt him. Then came the calls from the bank. Without my cooperation, his business accounts froze. He needed my signature to release funds, to renew contracts, to keep deals alive. But I stayed silent. Next came his partners. One by one, they backed away. Some outright accused him of lying about ownership. Others didn't want to risk their reputation by standing beside a man who publicly humiliated his own father. At home, the tension grew unbearable. His wife, humiliated by the scandal, started spending nights away. Arguments erupted behind closed doors, loud enough for neighbors to hear. The children felt the tension, too. Their laughter became quieter. My son tried calling me, texting me, even showing up at my apartment once. But I didn't open the door. I wasn't ready to listen. Not yet. It wasn't revenge. It was restraint. He needed to feel the weight of what he had done, to understand that some wounds cannot be healed with a quick apology. And so, while his empire crumbled, I sat in silence. Not triumphant, not bitter, simply watching, waiting, knowing that every fall begins with pride too high to see the ground beneath. Through all of this, the ones who suffered the most were my grandchildren. Innocent, pure-hearted, caught in the middle of a storm they never asked for. They would come to visit me whenever they could, sneaking away from the tense atmosphere of their home. The moment they stepped into my apartment, the air felt lighter. They'd run to me, arms open wide, filling the empty space with laughter. "Grandpa, can we stay here forever?" they once asked, their eyes big with hope. Those words pierced me. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to take them away from the chaos, to shield them from their father's mistakes. But I couldn't. They still needed their parents. So instead, I gave them what I could: safety in my presence, joy in small moments, and lessons in kindness. I told them stories of their grandmother, stories of their father when he was young and innocent. I made sure they knew their roots, even if the branches above were now twisted. One night, as I tucked them into bed during a sleepover at my apartment, my grandson whispered, "Grandpa, when I grow up, I'll never treat you the way Dad did." Tears filled my eyes, because in that moment, I knew, even if my son had lost his way, maybe the next generation still carried hope. After years of giving everything to my son, it felt strange to finally focus on myself. At first, I didn't know where to start. My apartment was small, the walls bare, the silence heavy. But slowly, I began to rebuild. Not just my surroundings, but my spirit. I picked up old hobbies I had abandoned long ago. I started gardening again, planting flowers in small pots along the balcony. Every morning, I'd water them and watch as new life sprouted from the soil. It reminded me that growth was always possible, even after seasons of loss. I also reconnected with old friends. Some of them I hadn't seen in decades. They welcomed me warmly, as if no time had passed at all. We'd sit for hours, drinking tea and sharing stories. For the first time in years, I laughed without forcing it. My grandchildren became the light of my days. They loved spending weekends with me. Together, we cooked meals, watched movies, and played games. In their laughter, I found healing. In their eyes, I saw the innocence and love that had once filled my own son. Most importantly, I discovered peace within myself. For so long, I measured my worth by how much I gave, how much I sacrificed. But now, I realize dignity isn't lost when others betray you. It's lost only when you betray yourself. So, I chose to live differently, quietly, simply, but with honor. While I was rebuilding my life, my son's world was collapsing around him. The business he once bragged about, gone. His partners withdrew, investors vanished, and debts piled up. Without my signature, without my trust, nothing could stand. The empire he tried to build on betrayal crumbled into dust. At home, his marriage was unraveling. His wife couldn't bear the shame of what he had done. The neighbors whispered. Friends avoided them. The respect he craved so desperately had turned into humiliation. One day, word reached me that he had been forced to sell his car, the same one he once flaunted in front of me. Soon after, the house, the very home he stole from me, was under threat of foreclosure. I should have felt satisfaction, but all I felt was sorrow. Not for his arrogance, not for his downfall, but because I had once seen so much potential in him. I had dreamed he would carry on my legacy, not destroy it. Still, I didn't interfere, because sometimes the only way a man learns is by falling all the way down. My son had chosen pride over love, greed over family, and now he was tasting the bitter fruit of those choices. I knew he would eventually come to me, not as a son demanding, but as a man broken. And when that day arrived, I would finally decide whether to forgive or let him face the full weight of his betrayal. The room was quiet, almost unbearably so, when I stepped inside. It wasn't the courtroom anymore, not in the legal sense. The hearing was over. The judge had already left, and the guards lingered in the corners like shadows. My son sat there on the long wooden bench, his back bent, hands clasped together as though he were praying. For the first time in years, he looked small, like the boy who once held onto my hand when he was scared of the dark. When he heard my footsteps, he slowly lifted his head. His eyes were bloodshot, his face pale. He didn't speak at first. We just stared at each other across the empty room, and I could feel the distance that years of lies, betrayal, and secrets had built between us. Finally, he broke the silence. "Dad." His voice cracked, fragile, almost unfamiliar. "I'm sorry." Those two words sounded heavier than anything I had ever heard from him before. He swallowed hard and continued. "I never meant for it to end like this. I was selfish, stupid, afraid. I thought I was protecting myself. But instead I destroyed everything. I hurt her. I hurt you. I hurt our family." His shoulders shook as he spoke, and he pressed his hand against his eyes like he was ashamed to even look at me. "I know I don't deserve it," he whispered, his voice trembling, "but I need you to forgive me. Not for me, but for you. I see what this has done to you. It's killing you, Dad. Please. I can't carry this if you hate me forever." Hearing him beg shattered something inside me. This was no longer the arrogant young man who thought he could hide the truth. He was broken, desperate, and terrified of losing the one bond that still remained. My chest tightened. Part of me wanted to take him in my arms, to tell him it was all going to be okay. Another part of me screamed that he had destroyed my trust, my daughter's life, and our family's future. The silence stretched, suffocating us both. He stared at me, waiting, tears glistening in his eyes. For the first time, I realized he wasn't asking for freedom or mercy. He was asking for me, for his father, and I didn't yet know if I could give him what he wanted. I stood frozen, my hands clenched at my sides. My heart was a battlefield. Love and rage, grief and duty, fighting for dominance. I looked at my son, the boy I had raised, the boy who once ran to me with scraped knees and tear-streaked cheeks. But now he was a man, haunted by choices he couldn't undo, begging me for forgiveness that my soul refused to give easily. I took a slow breath. "Do you even understand what you've done?" I asked. My voice was low, but it echoed in the empty room. He nodded, eyes fixed on the floor. "Every night I see her face. I hear her voice. I replay that moment over and over, and it's like I'm trapped in it. I destroyed her, and I destroyed you. I'll never forgive myself, Dad. But if you walk away hating me, I'll die with that hate inside me too." I turned away, pacing, unable to look at him. His words clawed at me, but so did the memories. The lawyer's voice over the phone, the night I first learned the truth, the way my daughter's laughter used to fill our home. It felt impossible to forgive him. To forgive meant to let go. And how could I let go of her? Finally, I stopped and faced him. "Listen to me," I said, each word sharp. "I can't erase what you've done. I can't pretend this family isn't broken because of your choices. Forgiving you, it feels like betraying our memory. But carrying this hatred will kill me too. And I refuse to let you drag me down into the same darkness." He looked up at me, hope flickering in his eyes. But I shook my head. "I'm not forgiving you. Not today. Maybe not ever. But I'm not condemning myself to hatred either. You will live with what you've done. That's your punishment. Mine is learning to live without the daughter I lost, and without the son I thought I knew." I stepped closer, just enough to see the tears streaming down his face. "For your sister's sake, I will not let this destroy me. But you must find your own way out of the hell you created." And with that, I turned and walked toward the exit. My footsteps echoed in the empty hall. He called out, but I didn't look back. For the first time in years, I felt something like freedom. Not healing, not peace, but release. Months passed. The weight of the trial, the lies, and that final confrontation with my son still lingered in my chest like a shadow that refused to leave. Yet life, in its cruel but stubborn way, kept moving forward. The mornings came whether I wanted them or not. The sun rose, the seasons changed, and I found myself standing in a world that felt both familiar and foreign. At first, I wandered like a ghost. I walked through the house, touching the pictures on the walls, listening for the laughter that would never return. My daughter's room remained untouched, as though she might walk in at any moment, roll her eyes at me, and ask why I was being so sentimental. But I knew she would never return. That truth had carved itself into me too deeply. And then, slowly, I began to change. I started going to the park in the mornings. At first, I simply sat on a bench, watching strangers pass by. Parents playing with their children, couples arguing, friends laughing. Life in its rawest form. And I realized the world hadn't ended with my pain. It had kept moving. And maybe, just maybe, I had to move with it. I found myself volunteering at a local shelter. It wasn't planned. I simply walked in one day, needing something, anything, to keep me from drowning in my own memories. Helping others gave me purpose. Seeing broken people find a spark of hope reminded me that even the deepest wounds could scar over with time. But my son, he remained a wound that hadn't healed. Letters came from him, pages filled with regret, memories of happier times, pleas for me to one day forgive him. I read them all, every single one, but I never replied. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I didn't hate him anymore, but I wasn't ready to open the door either. Some doors, once closed, can't simply be unlocked with words. And so I live now, not in peace, not in happiness, but in something steadier, acceptance. My daughter's memory walks with me every day. My son's choices haunt me, but they no longer consume me. Life after the truth isn't simple, but it is life. And for the first time in years, I can breathe. 3 years later, the phone rang again. It was my lawyer, the same man who had once delivered the shattering truth about my daughter. His voice was calm, measured, but I felt the tension behind his words. "Your son is being released," he said. "Time served, good behavior. He'll be free by the end of the week." I stood there frozen, the receiver pressed against my ear. For a moment, the world shrank to silence, and only the sound of my own heartbeat filled my chest. My son free? The boy who had betrayed me, destroyed his sister, and begged for forgiveness with tears streaming down his face? I didn't know how to feel. Part of me dreaded it, the return of a ghost I had locked away in the darkest corners of my memory. But another part of me, the father in me, stirred with something dangerously close to hope. Could people truly change? Could he? The day of his release, I didn't go to meet him. I couldn't. Instead, I watched from a distance. He stepped out of the gates, thinner, older, but there was something different in his posture. His arrogance was gone. His eyes scanned the crowd, not for applause, not for recognition, but for forgiveness. He didn't see me, and maybe that was for the best. I wasn't ready. Not yet. That night, a letter slipped under my door. His handwriting, the same messy scrawl I had once helped him practice when he was a child. "Dad, I don't expect you to forgive me. I just want you to know I've changed. I've learned the value of family, the pain of my mistakes, and the emptiness of pride. If you ever want to see me, I'll be waiting. Your son." I held that letter all night, and when the sun rose, I still didn't know whether to burn it or hold on to it forever. Weeks later, fate intervened. I wasn't looking for him, but life has a cruel way of putting us face to face with what we're not ready for. I was leaving the shelter after a long day when I saw him. My son, he was across the street, helping an elderly woman carry groceries. His hair was longer, his frame leaner, but his movements were careful, respectful. For the first time in years, I saw a glimpse of the boy he once was, the boy who used to carry bags for his mother, who used to smile at me with unshakable trust. He noticed me. Our eyes locked. Time seemed to freeze. For a second, I thought he would rush toward me, collapse into my arms, beg once more. But he didn't. He simply nodded. A small, humble gesture. Respectful. Patient. I turned away, my chest aching. My heart screamed at me to go to him, to take that step, to acknowledge the man he was trying to become. But my scars held me back. That night, I dreamed of my daughter. She was laughing, running through the garden as a little girl. And beside her was my son. They were together, happy, whole. I woke up with tears streaming down my face. Maybe the dream meant nothing, or maybe it meant everything. The next morning, I found myself holding his letter again, the words blurred with the weight of my emotions. And for the first time, I wondered, perhaps the real lesson wasn't for him, but for me. The days after seeing my son were filled with a strange restlessness. I couldn't focus on my routines, the shelter, the park, even the simple act of cooking. Everything reminded me of him. It was as if fate was whispering in my ear, "You can't run forever." I opened an old box I hadn't touched in years. Inside were photographs, faded but alive with memories. My wife, holding our son as a baby, his first school uniform, his wide grin when he scored his first goal in the neighborhood soccer game, and then a picture of him and his sister, sitting side by side, ice cream dripping down their hands as they laughed uncontrollably. I sat there, staring at those faces, innocent, pure, before betrayal, before lies, before the darkness swallowed us whole. My heart broke all over again. Where did we go wrong? I whispered aloud, though no one was there to answer. Was it my fault? Had I been too harsh, too blind, too trusting? Parents like to believe they shape their children's lives, but sometimes, children choose their own shadows. That night, I walked past his apartment. I didn't go inside, didn't knock. I just stood across the street, staring at the dim light from his window. Part of me wanted to barge in, demand answers, scream at him for all the pain. But another part wanted to sit with him in silence, just once more, like we used to. Memories are heavy, and sometimes, they don't just haunt you, they hold you hostage. The following weekend, life forced my hand. At the shelter, we received a new volunteer. I didn't recognize him at first. His beard was trimmed, his clothes plain, but neat. Then he turned, and my heart dropped. It was my son. He didn't smile. He didn't approach me. He simply worked, quietly, humbly. He carried boxes, handed out food, listened to the stories of the homeless, as if every word mattered. I watched from a distance, torn between pride and pain. At the end of the day, he finally came to me. He didn't try to hug me or excuse himself. He just looked me in the eyes and said softly, "Dad, I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'll learn to respect back, piece by piece, even if it takes the rest of my life." The room was silent. The volunteers watched us, sensing something deeper than words. My throat tightened. I wanted to respond, but nothing came out. He didn't press further. He simply bowed his head and walked away, leaving me trembling with emotions I couldn't control. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. His words echoed in my mind. Even if it takes the rest of my life. Forgiveness is not a gift. It's a test. And I wasn't sure I was strong enough to pass it. The next morning, I woke with a weight in my chest. I kept hearing his words. "I'll earn your respect back, piece by piece." Maybe for the first time, I felt he truly understood what he had done. I spent hours pacing the house, debating with myself. Should I reach out? Should I ignore him? Keep the walls up? Forgiveness still felt impossible, but maybe acknowledgement wasn't. In the evening, I found myself walking to the shelter again, even though I had no shift. The halls were quiet, only a few lights left on, and there he was, my son, sweeping the floor, as if the simplest chore mattered to him. I stood in the doorway for a long time before speaking. My voice cracked slightly as I said, "You missed a spot." He looked up, startled. Then, slowly, a small, almost shy smile appeared. "Yes, sir," he answered softly, and he went back to work. It wasn't much. No embrace, no long talk, no forgiveness. But it was a start, the smallest of steps. And for the first time in years, the crushing bitterness in my chest loosened, just a little. That night, I didn't sleep much. But when I did, I dreamed of my daughter again. This time, she wasn't running away. She was standing still, smiling at me as if she approved of what I had done. A week later, something unexpected happened. One of the shelter coordinators suggested a small dinner for the volunteers, a way to celebrate the work being done. My instinct was to decline. The idea of sitting across the table from my son filled me with dread. But something inside urged me to say yes. That evening, the room smelled of simple food, bread, stew, fresh fruit. People laughed, shared stories, clinked glasses of water. And then he walked in. My son. He froze when he saw me, his eyes searching mine for rejection. I didn't say a word. I just nodded toward an empty chair at the far end of the table. Slowly, carefully he sat. Throughout the dinner, I watched him. He didn't boast, didn't try to dominate the conversation. He listened. He asked people about their lives, their struggles. He even cracked a gentle joke that made the room laugh. For a moment, I almost forgot the years of pain. I almost saw the boy I had raised. Kind, thoughtful, eager to belong. When dinner ended, he approached me cautiously. "Thank you for letting me sit," he said. I didn't respond. I simply placed a hand on the table, close enough for him to see it tremble. He nodded, as if he understood, and left quietly. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was another step forward. Opportunities don't come often to men with stain names. But one afternoon, my son approached me outside the shelter, clutching a folded piece of paper. His hand shook as he spoke. "Dad," he began cautiously, "there's a construction company that's willing to give me a trial job. They know my past, but they're willing to see if I can prove myself." I studied him carefully. His voice no longer carried the arrogance of entitlement. Instead, it trembled with both fear and hope. "That's good," I said, keeping my tone neutral. He hesitated, then unfolded the paper. "But they want a reference. Someone who can vouch for my character. Someone they can trust." I thought. He paused, lowering his eyes. "I thought maybe you could be that person." The silence between us was suffocating. Memories of betrayal clashed with the image of this humble man before me. He wasn't demanding. He wasn't expecting. He was simply asking. "I'm not sure if I can," I finally said, my voice rough. "Trust isn't something you sign your name under. It's something you earn." His face fell, but he nodded. "I understand," he whispered. "Even if you can't, I'll still try." As he walked away, the paper still clutched in his hand. My chest ached. I wanted to help him, but part of me feared that one signature would undo all the walls I had built to protect myself. That night, I sat at my desk, staring at my pen. The choice lay heavy in my hands. The following morning, I found myself holding the letter again. A simple sheet of paper, requesting a reference, nothing more. But it felt like a weapon, sharp enough to cut through everything I had fought to rebuild. I thought of my daughter. What would she have wanted? Would she tell me to hold firm, to never forgive? Or would she remind me that people can change, even if it takes losing everything to realize it? By noon, I walked to the construction company's office. The receptionist looked up as I entered. My son wasn't there, only the manager, waiting with a polite but guarded smile. "Are you here for the reference?" he asked. I swallowed hard. My hand trembled as I held out the paper. "Yes, I'm here for that." For a long moment, I hesitated. Then, with a deep breath, I signed my name. Not for the son who had betrayed me, but for the man who was trying, piece by piece, to become someone better. When I left the office, the weight on my chest hadn't disappeared, but it felt lighter. Later that evening, my son found me outside the shelter. His eyes brimmed with disbelief when he realized what I had done. He opened his mouth to speak, but I raised a hand. "Don't thank me," I said. "Prove me right." For the first time in years, he smiled. Not with arrogance, not with victory, but with quiet gratitude. The morning sun spilled into the kitchen, painting the walls gold, but there was no warmth in me. My son sat silently at the table, staring at his hands like they held the answer to all his sins. I hadn't slept a second. My mind was tearing me apart. One part of me wanted to grab him, shake him, scream until he felt even a fraction of the pain he caused. The other part still saw him as my boy, the one I once carried on my shoulders. Finally, I spoke, my voice low, raw. "Do you realize what you took from her? From me?" His lips trembled. He nodded, tears streaming again. "I can't undo it, Dad. But please, don't throw me away. I need you." His words pierced me, but they also burned. He needed me now, after he had destroyed everything. My fists clenched so tight my nails dug into my skin. Rage and grief fought inside me like two beasts. I slammed my hand on the table, the sound echoing through the room. He flinched like a child. "Need me?" I growled. "Where were you when she needed you?" "Well, I needed a son I could trust." He broke down, sobbing, head pressed to the wooden table. The sound filled the house, haunting, miserable. I wanted to hate him forever. But the truth was, seeing him shattered broke me too. He was my blood, my failure, my punishment. The silence after his sobs was heavier than stone. I stood, pacing the kitchen, my hands shaking as if carrying invisible chains. My daughter's face flashed before me, her laughter echoing in my memory. Then my eyes landed on him, broken, desperate, waiting for my verdict. I felt like a judge with no gavel, a father with no answers. My chest ached as if my heart was splitting in two. Finally, I stopped walking. My voice came out like a whisper, but sharp enough to cut him. You will live with what you've done, every day, and you will earn your way back, inch by inch. Don't expect my forgiveness. Not today, maybe not ever. But if you want to stay my son, you'll fight for it. With honesty, with pain, with everything you've got left. He looked up, his swollen eyes searching mine. And for the first time I saw not just guilt, but something that looked like hope. I turned away before my tears betrayed me. My decision was made. I wasn't giving him freedom. I wasn't giving him peace. But I was giving him one last chance. Whether he deserved it or not, only time would tell. The room was so quiet that I could hear the ticking of the clock on the far wall. My son was still on his knees, his face pale, his voice trembling as he repeated, "Dad, I'm sorry. Please forgive me." I looked at him, and for the first time in many years, I didn't see arrogance. I didn't see the ambitious young man who thought he was smarter than his father. I saw a broken child, the same boy who once ran to me with scraped knees, begging me to make the pain go away. But memories can cut both ways. As I looked at him, other images came flooding back. The day he sat me down and told me to leave my own house, the coldness in his eyes as he closed the door behind me, the sound of my grandchildren asking why I didn't live with them anymore. Those wounds weren't healed. The silence between us was heavier than any words. He wanted me to say something, anything, but I refused to rush. Forgiveness, if it was to come, couldn't be cheap. I finally said, in a low voice, "You know, son, when you turned me out of my home, I felt like I was already dead. Tonight, you're asking for forgiveness. But do you truly understand what you've done? Do you realize the years you stole from me?" Tears welled in his eyes, but he nodded. "I know. I was blinded. By greed, by pride. And I lost everything. But I don't want to lose you, Dad. Please give me one more chance." My heart ached. Part of me wanted to reach out, to embrace him, to tell him that no matter what, he was still my son. Another part of me wanted him to sit in that pain a little longer, to truly taste what he had made me feel. The guests whispered among themselves, waiting for my answer. My grandchildren clung to my arms, their eyes full of hope. And I realized something important. My decision tonight wouldn't just affect me and my son. It would shape how my grandchildren understood family, respect, and forgiveness. So I took a deep breath and prepared to speak. "Stand up," I told him. My voice was steady, though my chest felt heavy. He hesitated, then slowly rose to his feet, wiping his tears. I looked him in the eye. "You betrayed me. You betrayed the very man who gave you life, who built everything you now claim as yours. That is not something easily forgiven." He lowered his head, ashamed. But I continued, "I am not here to destroy you. I am here to remind you, to teach you a lesson that no business, no house, no paper can erase. Family is not built on contracts. It's built on respect. And once that respect is gone, everything crumbles." His shoulders shook, and I knew my words had pierced through. I turned to the guests, to his wife, to my grandchildren. "I will not throw him out like he once threw me out, because if I do that, I am no better than he was." I handed the house documents to my lawyer and said, "These will remain in trust, under my name, and one day, under the names of my grandchildren. This house is not a trophy for arrogance. It is a legacy for those who still know how to cherish it." Gasps rippled through the crowd. My son stared at me, stunned. "You will live here," I said to him, "but under one condition. Every day, you must earn back the respect you lost. Not for me, but for your children. Because one day, they will treat you the way you treated me, and you will understand fully what you've done." For a moment, he just stood there, frozen. Then he broke down, sobbing openly in front of everyone. His pride, his ego, all of it shattered. I didn't hug him. Not yet. Some distances cannot be erased in a single night. But I did put a hand on his shoulder. "Redemption is possible," I whispered, "but only if you truly change." And with that, I turned away, leaving the entire room in stunned silence. The lesson had been given. What he would do with it, that was now his burden to carry. The party ended in awkward silence. Guests shuffled out quickly, whispering about what they had just witnessed. Neighbors who once admired my son's success now looked at him with pity, or worse, with judgment. His wife stayed behind, but the fury in her eyes was unmistakable. "You humiliated us," she hissed at him when she thought I couldn't hear. "Everything you built is gone, and it's your fault." He tried to answer, but his voice broke. He had no excuses left. For years, he had lived behind a mask of pride, but tonight the mask had shattered. I stood in the corner, watching quietly. It wasn't joy I felt, nor triumph. It was something deeper, heavier. The truth had finally been spoken, but truth always comes with consequences. My grandchildren clung to me, asking if I would stay. "We miss you, Grandpa. Please come back." Their words warmed my heart, but I knew healing would take more than a promise. That night, as I returned to my small apartment, I sat alone in the dark. The silence was different now. It wasn't the silence of abandonment, but the silence of choices waiting to be made. Forgiveness is never simple. You cannot force it. You cannot fake it. It must grow slowly, like a seed in dry soil. I thought of my late wife, her gentle smile, the way she always believed in second chances. "Don't be too hard on him," she would have said. "He's still your boy." But I also thought of the pain I had endured. The cold night I left my own house with nothing but 2 suitcases. That memory would not vanish easily. I realized then that the story wasn't finished. Tonight had been a turning point, but not an ending. The true test would come later, whether my son could rebuild not his wealth, but his character. As I closed my eyes, I whispered to myself, "Let him try, but I will not bend easily." Respect must be earned, even by blood. The following weeks were unlike anything my son had ever known. His business partners pulled away after hearing the truth. His reputation, once polished and untouchable, was tarnished beyond repair. Clients stopped calling, friends stopped visiting. At home, things were no better. His wife demanded answers, demanding security he could no longer provide. Every argument ended with the same bitter words. "If only you had listened. If only you hadn't betrayed your father." My son tried reaching out to me several times. He called, he wrote letters. He even showed up at my apartment. Sometimes I opened the door, sometimes I didn't. I needed him to understand that forgiveness wasn't a gift to be demanded. It was something to be earned. One evening, I found him waiting outside my building in the rain. His clothes were soaked, his face pale. When I approached, he didn't complain, didn't beg. He just said, "I'll wait here as long as it takes. I won't give up." Something inside me shifted. For the first time, I believed he might actually be willing to change. But belief wasn't enough. Proof was needed. So I gave him a task. "If you want to regain my trust," I told him, "don't bring me money. Don't bring me gifts. Show me your character. Help those you once ignored. Care for your family without arrogance. Only then will I consider your words." His eyes widened. He had expected anger, maybe rejection, but not a challenge. He nodded silently, and from that day, he began his struggle. Not against me, not against the world, but against himself. For the first time in years, I saw a spark of humility in his eyes. Whether it would last, only time would tell. Change never comes quickly, and for my son, it was like climbing a mountain barefoot. At first, he stumbled with every step. He was used to commanding, not serving, to receiving, not giving. But he tried, and that was more than I had expected. He began with his own children. Instead of dismissing them with excuses about work, he started spending evenings reading to them, walking them to school, and listening when they spoke. The kids, innocent and forgiving by nature, welcomed him back into their little world as if nothing had happened. Then he turned toward the community. He volunteered at the local shelter, serving meals and cleaning floors. People whispered when they saw him, "Isn't that the man who threw out his father? What is he doing here?" The shame cut him deeply, but he didn't run away. He kept showing up. I watched from a distance, never letting him know I was there. I wanted to see if his efforts were genuine or just a show for my benefit. But the more I observed, the clearer it became. This was not the proud, arrogant man who once claimed my house as his own. This was a man stripped bare, rebuilding from nothing. One evening, a neighbor came to me and said, Your son helped fix my roof last weekend. Refused payment. Just smiled and said it was the least he could do. I felt something stir inside me. A cautious hope. Maybe, just maybe, he was learning. But hope is fragile. I reminded myself not to rush, not to forget. Scars run deep, and a few good deeds cannot erase years of betrayal. Still, for the first time, I allowed myself to imagine a future where forgiveness might not feel like weakness, but like strength. I never told my son that I was watching, but I saw more than he realized. I saw the way he struggled to swallow his pride when people mocked him. I saw the tears he tried to hide when his wife threatened to leave. I saw the long hours he spent working at odd jobs just to put food on the table after his business collapsed. And slowly I saw something else. Humility. There was a day I will never forget. He came to visit me, holding nothing in his hands, no documents, no gifts, no promises, just himself. He sat across from me, and after a long silence, he said, "Dad, I don't expect forgiveness anymore. I only hope one day you can look at me without disappointment." His words pierced me more deeply than any apology could. For the first time, he wasn't begging to get something back. He was simply acknowledging the pain he had caused. That night, I sat awake, thinking about the man my son had become. He was no longer the reckless boy who thought success was measured in money and power. He was finally beginning to understand that true success was measured in respect. Respect for others and for himself. But forgiveness is a door that cannot be forced open. It must be unlocked from within. And though my hand lingered on the key, I wasn't ready to turn it. Not yet. I needed to see if his change would endure, or if it was just the desperation of a fallen man. So I waited, silent and watchful, knowing the final test of character was still to come. It is one thing to change when life is quiet, and another when storms arrive. My son's true test came unexpectedly, and it revealed whether his transformation was real or just an act. One evening, I heard a knock at my door. When I opened it, I found him standing there, exhausted, with his 2 children clinging to his legs. Behind them was his wife, holding bags in both hands. We have nowhere else to go," she whispered. Her voice was broken, stripped of its usual sharpness. Their landlord had evicted them after months of unpaid rent. His last business venture had failed completely. The little he earned from day jobs was barely enough to keep food on the table. They had no savings left, no safety net, and no pride to hide behind anymore. For a long time, I said nothing. The sight of them, my son humbled, his wife shaken, my grandchildren frightened, cut me in two. A part of me wanted to remind him of the night he cast me out into the street with 2 suitcases, to let him taste that same bitterness. But another part of me remembered what I had told him. Respect and responsibility must be rebuilt, not inherited. So I asked him a single question. "Why should I take you in now, when you turned me away before?" He looked at me with eyes that no longer carried arrogance, only desperation. "Because this time," he said, "I will not take your kindness for granted. I will work. I will serve. I will prove to you, and to them, that I can be the man you raised me to be." I studied him carefully. His voice was steady, not rehearsed. His children watched me with pleading eyes. His wife lowered her head in shame. And at that moment, I realized this was his trial. Not a test of wealth or ambition, but of humility, patience, and endurance. I opened the door wider. "You may stay," I said, "but this time under my rules. No arrogance, no deceit, only honesty. If you fail, you leave. Not just my home, but my life." He nodded, and in that small nod, I saw both fear and determination. Life under my roof was not easy for my son. I made sure of it. I didn't want him to believe forgiveness meant comfort without effort. I gave him chores, repairing broken steps, fixing leaks, cleaning the yard. He worked without complaint. His hands, once soft from office work, became rough with calluses. At night, he was exhausted, but he still found time to read to his children before they slept. His wife, too, softened. She began cooking for the family, helping with the household. Though her pride had once matched his, hardship humbled her as well. I could see her gratitude when she looked at me, a silent acknowledgement that I had given them a second chance. And slowly, something began to shift inside me. I had thought that letting them back into my home would reopen old wounds. Instead, it did something else. It showed me that people truly can change if forced to confront their own weakness. One night, as I watched my son carry his sleeping daughter to bed, I remembered the younger version of him, the boy who once clung to my back, laughing, asking me to carry him higher. Somewhere along the way, he had lost that innocence. But perhaps now, he was finding his way back. Sitting alone at the kitchen table, I whispered to myself, maybe this was a lesson all along. Not just for him, but for me too. To see that even when we fall, we can rise again. Forgiveness no longer felt like surrender. It began to feel like strength. Not the kind of strength that builds houses or businesses, but the strength that binds families back together after they've been torn apart. And for the first time, I thought, perhaps I can forgive him. Not today, not tomorrow, but one day soon. The winter that followed felt long, but honest. My son woke before dawn most mornings, slippers slapping the floor like a metronome of effort. He took short jobs, laboring on construction sites, helping an old carpenter fix shutters, painting a fence for a family who could barely afford it. Nothing glamorous, nothing loud, just work again and again, until his hands held the temporary proof of change. Small scars, split nails, calluses where his palms had been soft once. He started with the children. Even when the house was full of tension, he found 5 minutes to sit with them, listen to a silly joke, tie a shoelace that seemed impossible. He read to them at night, pausing to make the voices ridiculous, coaxing reluctant giggles. The children responded quicker than anyone. Their forgiveness was not the easy kind. It was a child's openness, and it softened the sharp edges he carried. Outside our home, people watched and waited. Some mocked him openly, old acquaintances who remembered the man he had been. Others nodded, tentative as spring shoots. He accepted both with the same steady face. At the shelter he once volunteered at, he scrubbed pans, swept floors, and mended a broken table for the dining hall. When a neighbor's roof leaked, he climbed up without complaint and worked until the rain stopped coming through. There were missteps. Once, tired and proud in equal measure, he returned to an old contact for quick cash, the kind of shortcut that had led him astray before. The man saw the chance and offered the same dangerous path. My son hesitated. The old instinct, greed, cunning, flickered in his eyes, but he turned away. He walked home without the easy money, hands empty but conscience intact. That moment mattered more than any applause. He started a small project to rebuild the park swing set that had been dangerous for years. He rallied a few volunteers, bought cheap wood with borrowed money, and worked shoulder to shoulder with them. When the first child climbed and squealed on the new swing, a woman in the crowd, one of the neighbors who once spat at his name, wiped her eyes and said, "Maybe he's different now." It was quiet, bitter, and hopeful all at once. At night, he came home exhausted. There were days his wife still flinched at his presence, but she no longer avoided him. She watched him cook simple meals or wash dishes without being asked, small rituals of repair. The proof wasn't complete. Forgiveness wasn't given. It was being earned, minute by minute, hammer stroke by hammer stroke. But the work was visible now, and that visibility made it harder to deny the possibility of change. I watched him, not as an adversary now, but as a careful gardener watches a recovering tree. You do not rush the healing. You don't prune until you know what will grow back. So I observed the seasons of his effort, the patience in his hands, the way he apologized without theatrical words, the way he showed up precisely when he said he would. One afternoon, I noticed something that felt larger than any single good deed. He took responsibility for a small, mundane thing that mattered to me. The old shed behind the house, the one I used to keep tools in, had become a mess. He asked if he could organize it. He didn't ask for permission in the grand way of entitlement. He asked the way a student asks for a task. I watched him sweep, sort, and label. The next week, he used one of those tools to fix the loose step on the porch that had worried me for months. Trust returns in small increments. I started to give him tiny responsibilities, fetching prescriptions, taking the grandchildren to school, managing the small market budget. Each task was a test and a chance. He handled them with a quiet thoroughness that made me want to believe. He still made mistakes, but he owned them immediately and did better the next time. There were evenings when the old pain rose up, memories like sharp stones underfoot. I would wake in the night and find his chair empty, or find him standing at the door watching the children play, and remember the night I left my house. Forgiveness was not a switch I could flip. It was a long, slow process of noticing that the boy who had caused so much hurt was being replaced by a man who sought to repair. One afternoon, when the roof leak returned after a hard rain, he climbed up without being asked and worked until his shoulders burned. When he climbed back down, I handed him a towel and found myself saying something I had not said in years. Thank you. It was a small word. It carried more weight than any signature. He didn't fall to his knees, but his eyes filled. I still kept boundaries. I made it clear that trust needed to be rebuilt day by day, and I insisted honesty above all. But I stopped shutting him out completely. I let him into small corners of my life again. The first time I left him with the grandchildren overnight, I felt the old tug of fear. Then, when I returned and found laughter through the hall, I realized it was no longer blind trust one was granting. It was a cautious, deliberate permission to keep trying. Forgiveness was no longer an impossible shore on the horizon. It was a path that could, perhaps, be walked back together, slowly, carefully, with eyes open. I did not say the word forgiven. Not yet, but I began to feel its shape under my feet. Though the father's heart began to soften, the son carried a different weight, his own relentless self-judgment. No matter how much work he did, how many hands he shook, how many roofs he repaired, the voice in his head whispered, "It will never be enough." At night, he would lie awake staring at the ceiling, his wife's soft breathing beside him. He wondered if every smile he received during the day was genuine, or just pity disguised as kindness. He kept remembering the faces of people he had wronged. Some had accepted his apologies, but others had not. One man slammed a door in his face, shouting, "You can build 100 houses, but you can't rebuild what you destroyed." That sentence stayed lodged in his mind like a splinter. Yet he did not quit. He threw himself into work as if every nail hammered was a confession, every repaired window a penance. His children became his compass. When they hugged him without hesitation, when they proudly said, "Papa fixed it," to neighbors, he felt a fragile sense of belonging return. But inside, he wrestled with doubt. He asked himself, what if Father never fully forgives me? What if I die with his shadow still hanging over me? He didn't fear labor, nor insults, nor loneliness. What terrified him was the thought that no matter how much good he did, his father would always see the ghost of his failures. So one evening, after a long day of work, he sat down across from his father, voice trembling but eyes steady. "I need to ask you something," he said. "If I spend the rest of my life making amends, will that be enough? Or am I condemned to remain the man I was, no matter what I do?" His father didn't answer right away. He looked at his son's cracked hands, his weary face, his eyes carrying both guilt and determination. The silence stretched, heavy, uncertain, but not hostile. Finally, the father said, "It isn't about erasing the past. Nothing can do that. It's about proving every day that the man you are now is stronger than the man you were then. And that is enough." For the first time in years, the son allowed himself to breathe. Spring arrived, carrying with it a quiet sense of renewal. The park swing set the son rebuilt was now alive with children's laughter, the sound echoing through the streets like a promise. Neighbors who once avoided him began to nod in acknowledgement, some even stopping for small talk. The change was not dramatic, but steady, like frost melting from a window pane. The father, though cautious, decided it was time for a test of faith. On his birthday, he invited the family for dinner, a tradition he had abandoned years ago. He expected awkward silence, perhaps even conflict, but what unfolded surprised him. The table filled with simple food, bread, stew, roasted vegetables. The grandchildren chattered, their small voices bridging gaps that words between adults could not. The son sat quietly, serving plates, pouring drinks, never demanding the spotlight. His wife smiled faintly, relief etched on her face, as if she could finally believe in a future where the family did not crumble. At one point, the youngest child climbed into the father's lap, tugging at his sleeve. "Grandpa," the boy said, "Papa's good now, right?" The question froze the room. All eyes turned to the father. He looked across the table at his son, who lowered his gaze. hands trembling on the tablecloth. The father felt the weight of years, the betrayals, the anger, the sleepless nights. Yet he also saw the sweat on his son's brow, the humility in his posture, the sacrifices etched into his hands. The father placed a hand on the boy's shoulder and said, "He's learning to be good, and that is what matters." It wasn't forgiveness, not entirely, but it was acknowledgement, and it cracked something open. The rest of the evening flowed gently. Laughter returned in cautious bursts. The family, once fractured, felt, just for a moment, whole again. Later that night, as they said their goodbyes, the son whispered to his father, "Thank you for letting me back in." The father didn't answer with words. Instead, he pulled his son into a brief, rough embrace. It was not complete absolution, but it was the closest they had ever come. Despite the fragile warmth of that birthday dinner, the son soon discovered that rebuilding trust wasn't a straight road. It was a path filled with hidden stones. Some neighbors still whispered behind his back. At the marketplace, he overheard a man mutter, "That's the one who betrayed his own father." Even though his children didn't hear, his heart sank. He wanted to scream, "I'm not that man anymore." But he knew shouting wouldn't erase their judgment. One evening, after returning home from work, he found his wife sitting quietly, eyes red. "They call me the wife of a thief today," she admitted. "Do you know how that feels? Carrying your shame on my shoulders." The words pierced deeper than any insult he had heard. He realized that his sins hadn't just scarred him. They had scarred everyone around him. The guilt grew heavier, pressing on his chest like an iron weight. The son decided he had to do something drastic, something undeniable. He gathered all his savings, money he had earned through sweat and hard labor, and placed it in an envelope. With trembling hands, he brought it to his father's house. When his father opened the door, the son held out the envelope. "This is for you. I don't want you to think I ever lived off what you built. Every brick I carry, every roof I fix, I do it to pay back what I took." The father looked at the envelope but didn't take it. Instead, he asked, "Do you really think money can buy back years of respect?" The son shook his head quickly. "No, but it can show that I'm not the same man anymore." The father studied him, long and hard. For the first time, he saw not arrogance, not excuses, but raw desperation, the kind that only comes from someone who has been broken and rebuilt. He didn't take the money. Instead, he said softly, "Keep it, not for me, for your children. Let them grow knowing their father stood up again after falling. That's worth more than gold." The son's eyes filled with tears. He realized his father wasn't asking for repayment. He was asking for proof of change every single day. A few days later, the father invited his son for something unusual, a walk through the old neighborhood. They strolled down the streets where the son had once played as a boy, where the father had carried him on his shoulders after long days of work. At first, the walk was quiet, heavy with memories. But as they passed familiar houses, neighbors began to nod, some even greeting the father warmly. Surprisingly, a few acknowledged the son as well. Not everyone, but enough to notice. The father slowed near an old oak tree. "Do you remember this place?" he asked. The son nodded. "I used to climb it, and you would catch me when I jumped." "Yes," the father said with a faint smile. "And do you remember what I told you?" The son thought, then whispered, "That you'd always be there to catch me." The father placed his hand on the rough bark. "I was, until the day you pushed me away." His voice cracked slightly, but he steadied it. "And yet, here we are, walking side by side again." The son swallowed hard. "I don't deserve this chance." "No," the father replied firmly. "You don't. But chances aren't given because they're deserved. They're given because sometimes a man needs to prove he can still climb, even after falling." They stood there in silence, the weight of years between them, the echoes of past betrayals and present hopes mingling in the air. It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was something close, like the first fragile leaf sprouting after a long winter. As they walked back, the son realized something. It wasn't about whether his father would ever fully forgive him. It was about whether he could live every day in a way that made forgiveness possible. And for the first time, he believed he could. Life has a way of testing bonds just when they begin to mend. For months, the son had worked tirelessly to prove his change, and the father, though still guarded, had started to see the sincerity in his actions. But one evening, fate intervened. The father was returning from the market when it happened. He felt a sudden weight in his chest, sharp and suffocating. His vision blurred, his steps faltered, and before he could cry out, his body gave way. Neighbors rushed to his side, shouts filling the street. "Call his son! Call his son!" Within minutes, the son arrived, panic etched across his face. He pushed through the crowd, knelt beside his father, and cried, "Stay with me. Please, father, stay with me." The ambulance came, lights flashing. The ride to the hospital was a blur of sirens and whispered prayers. The son held his father's hand the entire way, whispering, "Don't leave me now. Not when I finally understand. Not when I still have so much to prove." At the hospital, doctors rushed the father into emergency care. The son waited in the sterile hallway, heart pounding like a war drum. His children clung to his legs, wide-eyed and trembling. His wife sat with her face buried in her hands. Hours felt like days. The son replayed every moment of their lives, the laughter, the arguments, the betrayal, the fragile steps toward reconciliation. And now, when they had just begun to rebuild, death threatened to steal it all away. Finally, a doctor stepped out. "He's stable, but it was close. You should prepare yourselves. He'll need rest and constant care." The son nodded, tears streaming down his face. He didn't hesitate. "Then I'll be the one to care for him. Every day, as long as he needs me." That night, sitting by his father's hospital bed, the son whispered into the dimly lit room, "I once abandoned you when you needed me most. Never again. This time, I'll stay until the very end." The father stirred slightly, opening his eyes. His lips curved into the faintest smile before sleep pulled him back under. The days that followed were a true test of the son's vow. Morning and night, he sat by his father's bedside. He fed him broth when his hands were too weak to hold a spoon. He adjusted pillows, cleaned sheets, and learned to read every flicker of discomfort on his father's face. The nurses noticed. One of them whispered to another, "That's the son who threw him out years ago. And now he's here, never leaving his side." It wasn't easy. The father, still proud, sometimes resisted. "I don't need help," he muttered, trying to sit up. But his body betrayed him, trembling until his son gently eased him back. "You cared for me once," the son said softly. "Now it's my turn." Day by day, the father's strength returned. Yet something else was happening too. He began to see the sincerity in his son's care, not as an act of guilt, but as an act of love. One night, unable to sleep, the father watched his son dozing in a chair by the bed, his head tilted awkwardly, his hand still clutching his father's blanket. The sight pierced him. He whispered into the dark, though his son could not hear, "Maybe I was too harsh. Maybe he truly has changed." When morning came, the father said something he hadn't said in years. "Son, thank you." The words were simple, but they struck the son like a thunderbolt. He looked at his father, eyes glistening, and nodded. "No, father. Thank you for giving me another chance." It was the first time in decades that gratitude flowed both ways. And in that fragile exchange, forgiveness quietly began to bloom. Weeks passed in the hospital, and the father grew stronger. The son remained constant, bringing meals, reading aloud from old books, telling stories to keep the silence away. The nurses no longer looked at him with suspicion. Instead, they smiled, seeing the bond between father and son quietly knit itself back together. When the day of discharge arrived, the father hesitated. The doctor handed over instructions, and the son gathered the medicines carefully. As they prepared to leave, the father asked in a low voice, "Where will I go now?" The question startled the son. "With me, of course," he said quickly. "Your place is with us." The father frowned. "You've already built your own home. I don't want to be a burden again." The son's jaw tightened. He looked his father in the eye and said, "A burden? Father, you raised me when I was helpless. You carried me when I couldn't walk. You gave me everything. Don't you see? This is not a debt. It's an honor." The father's lips trembled, but no words came. He simply nodded, allowing himself to be guided into the car. Back at the son's home, the grandchildren ran forward, cheering, "Grandpa's back." They clung to him, their laughter echoing through the rooms. For the first time in years, the house felt full, not of tension, but of warmth. That night, as the family sat down for dinner, the father watched silently. He saw his son pass food to his wife, laugh at a child's joke, and bow his head in gratitude before eating. Something inside the father softened further. Perhaps this was no longer the arrogant son who once betrayed him. Perhaps this was a man reborn through struggle. And yet, the father still felt a shadow lingering. Could he ever fully erase the sting of betrayal? Or was forgiveness destined to remain incomplete? The question gnawed at him, even as joy surrounded him. Late one evening, after the house had grown quiet, the father called his son to his side. The lamp glowed faintly, casting long shadows across the room. "Sit," the father said. The son obeyed, sensing the weight in his father's tone. "I need to tell you something," the father continued slowly. "For all these months, as you've cared for me, I've seen your change. I've seen your sincerity. And yet, part of me still resents you. Not for what you did to the house, or even the betrayal of papers, but for making me feel unwanted, like a stranger in my own bloodline." The son lowered his head, shame pressing heavily on his chest. He whispered, "I know, and that is the wound I can never fully heal. But Father, let me at least keep trying." The father studied him for a long time. "Do you truly believe a man can change completely?" The son hesitated, then said, "Not completely, but enough. Enough to live each day differently. Enough to make sure my children never treat me as I once treated you." The father sighed, leaning back. His eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Then maybe that is enough for me too." In that moment, the distance between them narrowed. Not erased, not forgotten, but bridged by the simple truth that both were willing to keep trying. For the first time in many years, father and son sat in silence that wasn't heavy with bitterness, but peaceful with possibility. The weeks following the father's return home were calm, almost deceptively so. The son cared for him diligently, and the father, though cautious, allowed himself to lean into the routine. He began to smile more, laugh with the grandchildren, and even step into the garden on warmer mornings. Yet beneath the surface, trust remained fragile. One afternoon, while the father rested in the living room, he overheard a conversation between his son and a business partner on the phone. The partner's voice carried through the receiver. "If you sign those papers, you'll secure the deal. You'll double your earnings within a year." The father froze, memories crashing back. Papers, signatures, betrayal. His chest tightened. Was history repeating itself? Later, when the son entered the room, the father's eyes were sharp. "I heard you. About papers. About signing. Tell me, are you planning to trick me again?" The son looked stunned, almost wounded. "No, father. Never again. That was about my own work. Nothing to do with you. I would never drag you into that world again." But suspicion had already taken root. The father wanted to believe, but his scars burned. He whispered, "Once I trusted blindly. That mistake cost me everything. Forgive me if I cannot trust easily again." The son knelt beside him, voice steady but full of pain. "Then let me earn it, every single day. I don't want blind trust. I want earned trust, the kind that grows even in the shadow of doubt." For a long moment, neither spoke. But then, the father placed his hand lightly on his son's shoulder. Not full forgiveness, not yet, but a fragile signal. "I am trying." Just when it seemed life might settle into peace, fate intervened again. It was past midnight when the smell of smoke filled the house. The son woke to the sound of crackling wood. Flames licked the walls of the kitchen, spreading fast. His wife screamed, rushing to gather the children. The father, trapped in his room, coughed violently as smoke poured in. Panic surged through him. The fire reminded him of his own failing body, the helplessness of being unable to escape. But before fear consumed him, his son burst through the door, face blackened with soot, eyes burning with determination. "Father, hold on to me." He lifted his father into his arms, as if he were a child again. The heat was unbearable, the ceiling groaning above them. With each step, the son shielded his father with his own body, flames licking dangerously close. Outside, the family huddled together, coughing, weeping. Neighbors rushed with buckets of water, shouting instructions. But all eyes turned when the son emerged from the inferno, carrying his father across the threshold of fire. The father gasped for air, eyes wide with disbelief. His son collapsed beside him, coughing but alive. In that moment, The father saw the truth, not in words, not in promises, but in action. The son who once cast him out had now risked his life to save him. And for the first time, forgiveness no longer felt like a question. The fire had raged like a beast unleashed, swallowing half of the family's vineyard before the villagers finally managed to bring it under control. Smoke still lingered in the air, the acrid scent of charred wood and scorched earth biting into every breath. Blackened vines stood like skeletons across the fields, silent witnesses to destruction. The father stood at the edge of the ruins, his face a mask of stone. His hands were clasped behind his back, fingers digging into his palms until his knuckles whitened. For hours, he had said nothing. Only his eyes moved, scanning the devastation as if trying to measure the cost. Not in money, but in years of work, sacrifice, and pride. The son approached cautiously, soot smeared across his face, his clothes still damp from the water used to fight the flames. He carried guilt like a weight across his shoulders. Though he hadn't lit the fire, he had been careless, leaving equipment untended in the shed. A spark, a gust of wind, and the family's legacy had nearly been reduced to nothing. "Father," his voice cracked, fragile, uncertain. The old man turned his head slowly, his gaze sharp as a blade. "Do you even realize what you've done?" His tone was low, but the fury beneath it was unmistakable. "I didn't mean for this to happen." You didn't mean?" The father's voice rose, echoing across the ruined field. "Meaning doesn't rebuild vines. Meaning doesn't bring back what is lost." He took a step closer, the firelight from smoldering embers reflecting in his eyes. "This was not only my work, it was the work of generations. And you let it burn." The son lowered his head, shame pressing him down. "I was careless. I know. But please, I want to fix this. I'll spend every day rebuilding. Every hour if I must." Silence fell between them, heavy as the smoke-filled air. The father's chest rose and fell, torn between rage and the faintest flicker of something else. Sorrow, perhaps, or the fear of losing more than just land. The villagers watched from a distance, whispering among themselves. Everyone knew this was no longer just about the fire. It was about years of mistrust, mistakes, and unspoken wounds, now laid bare in the ashes. The father's lips parted, but no words came. He simply turned away, leaving the son standing alone amidst the smoke. The next morning, the fields were silent. The sun rose pale and weak, its light struggling to pierce through the lingering haze. The father sat at the kitchen table, a cup of untouched tea before him. His hands trembled slightly, though he tried to hide it. Sleep had eluded him, his mind replaying not only the fire but decades of choices, and the widening gulf between him and his son. When the door creaked open, the son entered quietly. He looked older than he had the day before, as if the fire had burned away the last of his youth. He set down a bundle of tools on the table. "I'm going to the fields," he said simply. The father's eyes lifted, sharp but tired. "To do what?" "Pick through ashes. To start again," the son replied firmly. "If there's even one vine alive, I'll save it. If not, I'll replant everything. But I won't walk away. Not this time." The father studied him, searching for weakness, for the usual signs of hesitation or excuses. But there were none. The boy's jaw was set, his gaze steady. For once, he wasn't speaking like a child begging for forgiveness. He was speaking like a man making a vow. "You think you can erase your mistakes with sweat?" the father asked bitterly. "No," the son admitted, "but I can prove I've learned. I can show you that I'm not the same fool who ruined everything. You've always said actions matter more than words. Then let me act." The father leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. His anger hadn't disappeared. It still burned, like embers hidden under ash. But alongside it was something else, the faint, reluctant spark of recognition. Perhaps, for the first time, the son truly understood what was at stake. "You will work," the father said at last, his voice rough. "Not because I forgive you, not because I trust you, but because this land demands it. If you fail again, it won't just be my disappointment you face. It will be the end of us both." The son nodded. "Then I won't fail." And without another word, he picked up the tools and walked toward the ruined vineyard. The father watched him go, torn between doubt and the smallest glimmer of hope. A hope he dared not admit aloud. The days after the fire felt strangely quiet. The house that once held my laughter, my tears, my sacrifices, and my son's betrayal now stood in ruins. Only blackened walls remained, like scars carved into stone. I thought I would feel nothing, but I felt everything: grief, sorrow, anger, and strangely relief. Because in that fire, something else burned away too: the illusion that family always means loyalty. My son came to me once more. His eyes were swollen, his hands trembling. He tried to speak, but his words stumbled like a child learning to walk. "Dad, I lost everything. My house, my business, my family's trust. I have nothing left. Nothing but you. Can you forgive me?" His voice cracked. For the first time in years, he wasn't proud. He wasn't arrogant. He was just my boy again. The same boy I once carried on my shoulders. The boy who called me a hero. And yet, I looked at him, and the weight of all his choices pressed against my chest. Forgiveness is easy when wounds are small. But when your own blood throws you into the street, when he spits on your sacrifices, when he lets greed replace love, can forgiveness truly erase that? I took a deep breath and said, "Son, I don't hate you. Hatred is poison, and I will not drink it. But forgiveness, it is not a gift I can hand to you like money or property. Forgiveness must be earned. You broke something far greater than walls and bricks. You broke my trust. If you want forgiveness, rebuild that, brick by brick, with humility, with respect, with love." He lowered his head and wept. For the first time, he understood. As for me, I walked away from the ashes, not as a man broken, but as a man free. I found peace in knowing I stood tall, even when abandoned. I discovered that dignity cannot be taken. It can only be surrendered. And I never surrender mine. So if you ask me what lesson I left behind for my son, it is this: you can lose a house, a business, even family, but the greatest loss of all is respect. Without it, you have nothing. With it, you can rebuild everything.